the Master Mason candidate is given several lectures. And one of the lectures, he is told to meditate upon the 47th problem of Euclid, which is also the 47th theorem of Pythagoras. And it's also known as the Pythagorean theorem, which is the sum of the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the square of the other two sides in a right triangle. And of course, everybody goes, huh? You know, what's that got to do with anything? But it sounds really impressive. And of course, it's never explained. You have to go and look it up. You have to take the initiative and go into a Masonic library or a Scottish Rite library. Fortunately, there was a huge one in Milwaukee where I lived. And then you learn what they're being told. What they're being told is that, and again, symbols have different levels of meaning. And for example, the upright part of a right triangle symbolizes Baal. The horizontal part of the right triangle symbolizes the female, who is of course prostrate and passive. And the hypotenuse, which connects the two, that symbolizes the divine child that Baal and the goddess create. Baal and Astarte, Isis and Osiris, pick the name, they're all the same thing. They're trying to evoke the trinity, the pagan trinity of Baal or Osiris and Isis and Horus.
The squared elements of this Pythagorean trinity resemble the letter Y. In his book, David Oveson suggests that Washington, D.C. was intentionally placed at the split of the Potomac and Eastern rivers to symbolize this Pythagorean Y. It was George Washington who outlined the 10-square-mile parameter for the city, according to the cardinal directions. But Oveson's principal theory is that in L'Enfant's original plan, the White House, Washington Monument, and Capitol Building were designed in a right triangle, according to a star pattern above, where 3 stars surround the constellation Virgo, forming a stellar triangle. According to Oveson, the Federal Triangle actually exists within this greater triangle, but with the same purpose. This Hermetic symbolism, above and below, is intended to draw upon the spiritual energies associated with Virgo. But for what purpose? Could it be that as Isis brings forth Horus, so the energies of the Virgin are intended to bring forth the divine child? Oveson refers to Pennsylvania Avenue as the spiritual center of Washington, D.C., partly because it forms a direct line between the Capitol Building and the White House, but also because Pennsylvania Avenue is the hypotenuse of the Federal Triangle and symbolizes the divine offspring of the pagan Trinity.
The divine child is supposed to be the, for lack of a better word, the New Age Messiah. He's supposed to be the product of the coming together of the cosmic feminine forces and the cosmic masculine forces to produce a synergy.
This synergy of the masculine and feminine is said to be a key understanding of all occult doctrine. These are the positive and negative, like the black and white imagery of yin and yang. Sir Francis Bacon held to these ideas through the gods Apollo and Athena. Bacon took his mystical views from the teachings of Kabbalah.
You know, in Kabbalah, it's taught that a man and a woman is a complete vessel, and that's the only way for the holy light to be held entirely.
This concept of completion is further defined by the esoteric concept of alchemy.
In Arabic, the term for chemistry is alchemia. In the European languages, that becomes alchemy, but it's an Arabic term that simply means the chemistry. The chemia, chemistry.
Alchemy is like divine chemistry. You could use that as a term. It's about transformation. It's about transformation of the lower self to the higher self. Of some use the symbolic expression of lead to gold.
This divine chemistry is sometimes called the chemical marriage or wedding. In the 17th century, the Rosicrucian order put forth a document called The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. A Rosicrucian website explains the purpose of the tale, saying that alchemy is based on the view that man, as a result of the loss of his original Adamic state, is divided within himself. He regains his integral nature only when the two powers are again reconciled with one another.
And so, just as there was an Adam and Eve, there's a husband and a wife, there's a man and a woman, because it's two different qualities, positive and negative, and together they make the whole.
Throughout Washington, D.C., the alchemic and Pythagorean principle of the male and female seems to be repeated again and again. Notice here the James Buchanan Monument, with a male figure to one side and a female to the other, while President Buchanan, who also happened to be a Freemason, is placed in between them, where the perfected man would be. But perhaps the clearest single representation of this Pythagorean alchemical formula is the Boy Scout Memorial found on 15th Street between E Street and Constitution Avenue. The Boy Scouts of America were founded by a Freemason named Daniel Carter Beard. And so it seems only fitting that the Boy Scout Memorial would be a kind of American Trinity, where the Boy Scout himself stands in the place of the divine offspring. Yet esoterics argue that this divine offspring cannot come forth without help from above.
Primary sources indicate, as Jefferson and other of those who were involved with architecture, that you lined up the heavens with whatever you were creating, have it built at a certain time, and that would pull the spiritual energies and powers into that location.
The idea of receiving help from heavenly powers was the ancient practice of alchemists, Rosicrucians, and those in pursuit of secret knowledge. But on Pennsylvania Avenue, the General Gordon Meade statue seems to clearly capture this idea. Meade was the Union general who defeated Robert E. Lee at the famous Battle of Gettysburg, sometimes called the bloodiest and most decisive battle of the Civil War. One that ultimately decided that the American states would remain united. Notice the general standing in the forward position with the golden standard of victory above his head, while behind him are a series of mythical god and goddess-looking figures, as if they might be powers and principalities from the heavenlies. In total, the statue seems to represent the idea that Meade was empowered by heavenly forces to accomplish what he did. But exactly what forces are these? And what power do they represent?